I went from a promising future to contemplating crime after my spouse embezzled thousands while I was at a funeral. Now, juggling a car with no insurance, mounting debt, and a court date looming over me, I'm left wondering, will I be a criminal now? What a mess. This is the story of how I became a criminal. Ironically, I just watched Breaking Bad this year and completed it. I was not even aware of how easy it was to become a criminal in the first place, but anyway. I belong to the demographic that can be classified as a criminal because I associate with criminals, I live next to criminals, I attended school with many criminals, and honestly, the fact that I was not one sooner is criminal, based on the logic being presented here, of course. Essentially, I would like to begin the story with some background information about myself so we understand the malevolence we are dealing with here. I am from the dark lands of the North, Alaska. I was born on Halloween, and ironically, I was born right after a man exploded in my childhood garage. I am not sure of a less direct or indirect way to say that. I had a strong start to life because of this event though, but things began to decline rapidly. My mother, around the age of 42, had me after previously having 4 boys. To her dismay, I was born premature, cross-eyed, and possessed a gene that makes me resemble a cat-like cartoon character with a pink spot, not quite so dramatic but essentially, with the potential to be around 4 feet 10 inches tall and have a deformed face. Fortunately for me, I only received all those characteristics to a very mild degree, except for the height. I was the smallest until I permanently reached nearly 5 feet 6 inches at around the age of 12, which was taller than both of my parents. Anyways, I was born a girl and that caused me the most confusion. Between my teeth sticking straight out of my face and my obsession with anime, I was an oddity. No amount of money could fix me, to be honest. By the time I was about 7, my family had mismanaged our finances to the point where I mostly consumed ramen, bread, and other wheat products. I definitely had a sugar addiction. Alright, a little off track. I was around 15 when my mother died of cancer after suffering for 9 months. On the same day that she died, I was registered for an alternative high school, which I essentially completed with a GPA of 4 and finished high school in 2 years, receiving a full scholarship to college from foster care, but that does not fit our narrative of me. I'm horrible. Anyway, I flunked out of college alongside my sort of foster brother. He and I traveled to the big island of Hawaii with another friend and became poor farmers for a while. I had some debt that I needed to pay off, so I left to become a salmon processor, where I was promoted all the way to manager and ran the factory by myself. I also transitioned around this time, which has somewhat hindered my career because I need to share a room. Salmon season is only a couple of months, though, so I had to become creative when it came to surviving the rest of the year. I decided to get into reselling items in Hawaii, where I bought land and made enough to create the perfect life in Colorado. At this point, I am married. Unfortunately, my spouse, with whom I am largely just stuck, is mentally challenged in ways that are creative to me. My theory is that they have untreated autism and they have grown a lot, but they have somewhat made it their mission to destroy our life here in Colorado. Despite not accomplishing much in Hawaii, they managed, while we were briefly apart, to become a technician and secure a well-paying job. They advanced in their career, and we decided to get back together after they nearly died. I was excited and decided to quit my job to focus on rebuilding my resale business. I concentrated on developing skills and many other things, while generally being a cat dad, cooking and cleaning. My sort of foster brother was living with us, and I was trying to help him because life is hard, so he paid a little under $400 a month to rent a room. However, he did not really contribute at all over the 2 years and merely ordered takeout every night. He truly didn't help me at all now that I am fighting this all the way out. But anyway, 2024 is when things began to deteriorate for me. My foster brother didn't really share the same perspective on family or anything productive. Another friend of 12 years moved in, and he also left without contributing. We had my spouse's sibling move in as well with their boyfriend. They paid half the rent and things were fine. So what did I do? Well, my ride-or-die aunt passed away. Her heart failed, and I was already planning to go to Alaska to visit family since another friend of mine decided to recreate the first event from my life, relating to a completely different tragic story. I was in Alaska when my spouse called to tell me they packed everything and left. We have our cats though, and I left as soon as possible, knowing I had work in Alaska. Why did this matter? Well, when my spouse and I got back together, they got into a game called Isuki Slow Life and managed to spend 15,000 of their money behind my back. We had a budget, but they just conveniently excluded that amount and our situation never improved. Our lives did not upgrade, no debts got paid down, no progress towards the business, nothing. I was using the last of the debt I could spend to go to Alaska, which was around 700. I had not gone out or done anything at all that year, just content when we could get McDonald's. I also worked on a lot of art. My spouse, after embezzling all our money, knowing we came from a shack in the Hawaiian jungle where we had to use a bucket as a toilet and had no refrigeration, packed everything and left while I was at a funeral. I returned home and the cats were fine. However, the water pump was broken because they had no water. My siblings' plans failed, and they moved back in to reveal they had lied about getting a new job and had been laid off for a month. Then their sibling and my friend left, and they did not pay the last month's rent. I stood there in disbelief because one moment I was on track with no debt, savings, and my business getting started, and now I had lost $26,000 because I had to sell the van we invested $11,000 into for $3,000 to avoid eviction. Now for the grand climax. I had the brilliant idea to purchase an electric car so I could qualify for either the state or federal tax credit of $7,500. I shopped around carefully and received a manufacturing rebate on a 2025 car. I ensured everything was legitimate, and I even have paperwork to support this. I thought if this car is $14,000, then I owe $14,000, and with the $15,000 tax credit, I would have a free car. Of course, I was planning to pay off all my debt with this money and move back to Alaska to attend college to become a corporate lawyer after I secure a USDA loan for land. As I am from Alaska, this would all be mine. I would then sell the 2025 car for the entire loan amount at CarMax or anywhere really, since it has under 4,000 miles. Everything was still fine. But this is how I became a criminal, yes. I did not have the $800 to register the car. Then it appeared there would be no tax credit, which was a hitch in my plan. The manufacturing rebate was a fraud, and I may only be able to get the state refund. However, I am currently rejected until I submit the receipt for the car, and they process that in the coming months, and perhaps we could still obtain it. So my car still is not registered, of course. One of my brothers came to town and wanted a cheap vacation. We were returning home from the bar where we played pinball, and I did not drink, of course. As if the stars aligned that day, my insurance unexpectedly expired. We did get it again immediately and still have it. I received a ticket for no insurance and no registration, and I need to appear in court almost a month after I fly back to Alaska, where I may have secured a job at a salmon cannery. The issue is I cannot attend court because my phone will be turned off. I plan to surrender this car to the bank right before I leave, thereby losing more money, and my debt has ballooned from a manageable $4,500 to around $6,000. Plus, my spouse, with whom I am still together because their plan after being unemployed for the last 6 months is to live homeless or go to Arkansas to stay with their parents, and I am like, no. I share a loan and cannot divorce because I do not have $300. Thus, they need to come to Alaska and work off this debt that they share with me. Additionally, during all of this, they co-signed for a random car for their sibling's boyfriend. So their debt has also effectively doubled, where they have $6,000 for the car and I have $6,000, $3,000 of which is theirs, along with whatever amount the bank does not recover from this auction. I believe my spouse may also receive another settlement check for one of the 2 accidents they had. Did I mention they also damaged our car, which we are auctioning, by hitting a curb incredibly hard for no good reason? It is very frustrating, but you may wonder where I have been regarding getting a job these last 6 months since I returned from those funerals, and why I did not take action. Well, I could hire an attorney to attend my court date on my behalf instead of not showing up and subsequently missing a criminal hearing, which would result in a warrant. As of now, my best option is to take my cats and go to Alaska. As for why I did not secure a job in the 5 months my spouse has been unemployed, it is due to mainly an entire book of excuses where I did not even try. Looking back, I think I could have made a significant difference had I merely found a job. Anyway, regarding employment, why would I listen to my spouse when I asked them to resolve this issue and find a job, which they said they had no problem with, so they could ultimately put in minimal effort? I do not know. I feel like I have always been a seasonal worker and hustler, so as long as the hustle kicks in, I can earn money. Ultimately, I just knew all along I was expecting $15,000, and I did not want to unnecessarily drive our car. I did not want to work just to pay all my earnings and transportation costs. Additionally, my aunt, whose heart failed, worked herself to death with 3 jobs. Okay. I applied everywhere around me multiple times, but I just was not selected. I mean, I am 28 years old with no fast food experience. I worked as a barista at the homeless shelter as my second job since I have been working on and off since my mother died. There is not much I have not done that is not barred from a degree, of course. I am going to be all right, but I wanted everyone to understand that if I do receive a criminal record, it is because I am terrible and not because I am extremely poor. Story 2. After 3 years of deep love marked by emotional highs and lows, I ended my relationship over the phone. I told him, I don't want this to end, but I need time to heal. His painful response echoed, it was all for nothing. Is there still hope for us? I need advice and to hear other perspectives on this. I cannot get out of my own head. Our relationship has always been turbulent, but it felt worth it because it was with him. Then a cycle began. This will be long, so to make a long story short, after years of this cycle, things improved significantly. Yesterday, I broke up with my boyfriend over the phone, even though I was hoping to talk to him in person about taking a break. I have not healed from what he had broken. Now I am experiencing so many mixed emotions. How do I heal from this? Do you believe a future together is possible? The second to last paragraph is about the breakup. The last paragraph is my question. He and I female are both in our early 20s and have been together for a little over 3 years. We met when he was 19 and I was 20. We started communicating and our connection deepened. It is important to note that early on, he confided in me about his trust issues and I was okay with that. I believed I could prove myself trustworthy. We continued talking, and the first few months were magical, filled with profound conversations, romantic dates, creating playlists that told stories of our lives, beautiful handwritten letters exchanged, late nights lost in the city while gazing at the stars. He even gave me a necklace that I wear every single day. He was my first kiss, my first sexual partner, my first love, my first everything. He would often look into my eyes and say they hypnotized him, claiming he could not gaze at me for too long without being turned to stone. However, after a few months, he told me that my eyes no longer had that effect on him. I was hurt, but I pretended I was not. He retracted that statement during our next meeting, but soon after, he said he was unable to commit because of personal challenges he was facing. I expressed my sadness but assured him I understood and would wait for him. I watched him walk away as I cried. I wept and wept. A few days later, he called me, invited me to an event, and made me his girlfriend. Although I was still hurt from his earlier abandonment, I was ecstatic to be together. The following couple of years included many magical dates and thoughtful gifts exchanged, but to be honest, there were more downs than ups. We both had busy schedules, but I consistently saved certain days and times for him. Unfortunately, he did not reciprocate. Initially, we saw each other once a week, but eventually those opportunities diminished, even though he continually promised we would see each other more. He became emotionally distant and would sometimes make rude comments even towards strangers. He caused me to cry on 2 of my birthdays. His behavior became increasingly erratic. He would bottle everything up, push me away regardless of how hard I pleaded to support him, and when he pushed me away a little too far, he would return, apologize, and confide in me about his life. The cycle continued, with him pushing me further away each time before clinging back to me more intensely. I recognized he had immense challenges, but I faced struggles as well. I never pushed him away or spoke to him as coldly as he did to me. He also exhibited significant insecurity towards other men. Out of fear of upsetting him, I ended many friendships with male friends and felt uncomfortable standing next to male coworkers for too long, worried he might see me and lose trust in me. I hurt many old friends by ghosting them. There were additional alarming behaviors, such as occasional outbursts of anger, though he never directed them at me, questionable views and comments regarding women, and a troubled relationship with his mother and sister. He faced family challenges, so it was understandable. Nonetheless, I consistently gave him the benefit of the doubt because during our happy moments, he treated me well and respected me. As the negative cycle persisted and worsened, the effort between us lessened, our shared time dwindled, and my trust eroded. I experienced heartbreak repeatedly. I found myself crying more days than I smiled. However, I remained because those high moments were so beautiful. I had never felt anything like that before. I had never loved anyone as deeply as I loved him. But my anxiety peaked, and I began regressing into a disorganized attachment style, the push-pull dynamic that I had worked so hard to unlearn because of those drastic emotional highs and lows. My eating disorder gradually resurfaced. I started developing deeper trust issues due to his lack of trust. It felt as if his wounds were bleeding onto me, creating my own wounds, and I suspect I reopened some old wounds as well. Eventually, I realized discussing his behavior was unproductive. I became distant, my messaging became less frequent, mirroring his energy. He noticed and felt guilty. He would apologize and express a desire to improve, but why did it take my withdrawal for him to recognize what was happening? Ultimately, I could no longer endure this cycle. After 2.5 years, I nearly ended things last summer. This was one of the first times I witnessed him truly break down, crying sincerely. I requested no contact, but he broke that promise multiple times, sending me sweet messages, apologies, and beautiful love songs. Eventually, I initiated contact very early because I missed him, I loved him, and I knew he loved me. However, I had not healed from the damage, which I believe contributed to our current situation. After that near breakup, everything changed. The Life Story playlist returned, he dedicated more time to me, he became more affectionate after intimacy, he communicated and opened up more, and the beautiful nights that had once been common were restored. He even gifted me thoughtful presents for my transition to a new university. A jar containing 100 things he loves about me, and a custom Spotify glass frame with pictures of us alongside one of my favorite songs from Steven Universe. It was everything I had ever desired. However, I remained hurt, and while I could not acknowledge it at the time, it felt too late. I found myself questioning why he only made those efforts when I was on the verge of leaving. Nevertheless, I stayed because I saw his commitment to improvement and I believed in him. I believed in us. Since then, we have experienced some downs, but overall our relationship improved. His relationships with his friends and family enhanced, his mental health improved, and I could not be prouder of his progress. Yet I am heartbroken to admit that I remain stuck. I have not been able to heal my past wounds, and I constantly feel paranoid and anxious. I was the one who could not trust him. I could not let down my walls. I was distant. Perhaps not cold, but definitely distant. I felt like a terrible person for experiencing these emotions. Fast forward to a week and a half ago, he was spotted ice skating with another girl. When I asked about it, my feelings overwhelmed me and I cried. He reassured me it was merely a coworker. Eventually, I accepted that I might never know the truth. However, I recognized that I had cut off all my male coworkers and friends and had begged him for trust, going so far as to show him photos. I realized that, in addition to my persistent anxiety, I was now fearful of him cheating, especially with the tangible evidence presented. Clearly, in terms of trust and distance, our roles had shifted. We had several lengthy discussions. He acknowledged that I had every right to feel as I did and admitted that if he were in my position, he would react even worse. He apologized for his past actions, recognizing that the wounds I was trying to heal were caused by him, which I truly appreciated. He always took accountability, but he repeatedly expressed frustration, asking what more he needed to do to prove his love, insisting that I was not feeling his affection. One comment he made particularly resonated with me and pierced my heart. When I asked if he believed I loved him, he replied that at that moment he did not. After everything, despite my unwavering support through challenging times, he did not believe I loved him. I was devastated and compelled to ask what I had done to make him feel this way. Fast forward to yesterday. I texted him asking when he would return from a trip, expressing my desire to talk in person when he arrived. He called me concerned and I told him to enjoy his time, assuring him I would see him upon his return. However, he continued to press and eventually everything came to light. He told me, but I've been doing better. I acknowledged his progress but insisted it was now my responsibility to fix myself. I explained that I did not want to end our relationship. In fact, I revealed that I was unsure of what I wanted. I still loved him so much, and it pained me to admit that I was still hurt despite his efforts. I knew I needed time alone to figure out why I felt this way and how to resolve it because my anxiety in this relationship was overwhelming. He responded with frustration, insisting that all his efforts seemed futile if I was still unhappy. He felt enraged that he had tried so hard, yet I was still not healed. I reassured him that I enjoyed our time together and did not want our relationship to end indefinitely. I reiterated that I simply needed time to heal and that I still loved him deeply. He expressed disbelief, stating he could not understand how someone could love another and choose to give up. He suggested that a break would only prolong the inevitable and that it felt like I was waiting for a verdict of yes or no on whether we would be together. I conceded that he had a point, acknowledging it might not be fair to him. I told him I loved him, and in a seething tone he replied, "Do not just say it. I am not giving up until I hear you say it." At that moment, I expressed my feelings, admitting that I did not want this to end, but I believed it had to so that I could heal at least for now. The last thing I sobbed was, "I love you," he said, choked up. "I have to go." For those of you who actually read this, thank you. It genuinely means a lot. I need to hear something from outside my own head from unbiased perspectives. My question is, how do I heal from this? How do I move forward? Do you think a future exists for him and me where we are both healed? I am acutely aware that I hurt him yesterday and that he might choose to move on, resent me for the rest of his life, or simply not want to be with me anymore. But if he chooses to stay, could there still be hope given our history? Story 3. Caught my boyfriend in a shocking betrayal at 4:30 am there someone here, he said, while I stood confused outside. After packing my things, he blamed me for his cheating, declaring I wasn't emotionally present. How did I not see the red flags? Update to follow. I am still feeling incredibly numb. I never suspected anything. We typically connect on Thursdays as well as on other days throughout the week, but this Thursday, which was yesterday, he informed me that he was meeting up with his father to watch the game. I thought nothing of it and was happy for him. I decided to pick up an overtime shift to pass the time as I am a first responder and planned to surprise him by stopping by. We had always maintained an open-door policy and he encouraged that. I walked up to the door after parking in the garage, only to find it locked. His truck was there, the lights were on, which left me confused. It was 4:15 a.m. I started trying to call him. He lives an hour away from me and 45 minutes from my workplace. Going home barely crossed my mind because I wanted to see my partner. I called 4 times, picturing him sleeping through each call. I walked over to the bedroom window and tapped lightly before heading back to the door and knocking. I could hear the dog whining. He loves me and wanted to be let out to me. Finally, my partner came to the door looking frazzled. His eyes were bloodshot. I thought I had just woken him up. I started apologizing, expressing how sorry I was for waking him, as I genuinely wanted to see him. As I reached to wrap my arms around his neck and kiss him, he stopped me. I felt confused. I can't. What do you mean, are you serious? There's someone here. The realization was slow to dawn on me. Who could it be? His father, his daughters. Wait in your beds. Oh yes. What the heck? I was not convinced. Was he lying? Here I was an hour from home at 4:30 in the morning being told that my boyfriend had another woman in his bed. 2 weeks ago he was hinting at marriage. What happened? Why? I was completely dumbfounded. I returned home safely after packing 70% of my belongings. He had to pack my bag for me since there was another woman in his bed who definitely heard our exchange, all while he offered half-hearted apologies and attempted to blame me for what he did, claiming I had been off for 2 weeks and that he had planned to end things this weekend, citing our incompatibility, which was a surprise considering our intimate moments and declarations of love. I cannot believe this. I feel so used and foolish. I know I am trying to make sense of nonsense, it just makes me feel sick. Update. Many were asking how long we had been together. It was only 6 months, so thankfully nothing too long, I suppose. My ex had an affair after we had been together for 10 years and it was absolutely devastating. We tried to work it out for almost 2 years, but we eventually agreed it was not working and split. This was my first relationship after that. I returned for my belongings about 12 hours later. One of my male coworkers with a truck drove me, and I am so grateful he did. I had been awake for 30 hours and did not feel comfortable driving, let alone going alone. It was a good opportunity for reflection. I had been dismissing red flags. He talked a big game but didn't consistently provide the emotional support I needed, especially being a paramedic. I began to notice he always turned the conversation back to himself. He did not have a stable job and complained about never seeing his children who lived an hour and a half away. He often spoke poorly about how his father cheated on his mother for years, destroying their family, and he claimed he never wanted to do that to his ex-wife. He said she left him because he wanted to be faithful. He promised he would never put me through what my ex did. He always boasted about valuing communication and having emotional intelligence, something many people lack. Then I recalled when we first got together. His friend, a mutual acquaintance who had been trying to match us for years, pointed out his current friend the day after we slept together. At the time, I assumed we were just a one-time fling, and I did not know how to interpret that comment. I now regret not approaching her and asking for a "hey girl" moment, as it would have confirmed my suspicions that he simply leads with the enjoyment of a new fling that could involve cheating and retreats when things get hard or real. When I arrived to collect my belongings, I did not just walk in, I knocked and waited. The moment he opened the door, I felt anger. I began gathering the items I had left behind. Mind you, I realized how much I had bought for this place: a vacuum, a steamer, a countertop dishwasher, a kitchen island trolley, an air purifier he used to smoke in the house, and all sorts of other things to make the house a home, items his daughters enjoyed too. I wanted to act petty and take the entry rugs, the garbage can, and the shower filter. He lives in the country and relies on a well. But I did not. During the collection, I mentioned a few things. I called him a coward for not being man enough to talk to me first. I told him that his worst fear of ending up like his father had come true and that I hoped he was proud of himself. He became defensive immediately, claiming that because I had been unresponsive, he was going back through his checklist and I was not meeting his needs. He said I was ghosting him and that he needed to hear from me more. I asked how seeing each other 2-3 times a week was not sufficient, and he claimed that in the past week it had not been. So I asked him why that was my responsibility. For 6 months I drove the 2-hour round trip to spend 2 5 nights a week with him. Where was the balance? He only came into the city 3 times in 6 months, one of which was purely for his convenience when he met me for dinner since he was already in the city for other plans. This man then had the audacity to ask, "Oh, so you're keeping score?" For the record, I work 3 jobs: full-time paramedic, part-time administrator for a hospital, and I referee semi-professional hockey. He was aware of this before we got together, and we discussed me leaving one job if we committed, and I received some help financially and with my dogs. After 3 months of dating, I bought a calendar and wrote everything out for him so he could see when I was available, allowing us to plan accordingly. I asked him if it made it easier for him to cheat. He insisted he was not like that, stating this was the first and only time, and he was going to tell me about it when he broke up with me on Sunday. I inquired about the overlap between me and his last girlfriend. He denied having one before me. I recalled him texting me about having loose ends to tie up, but he wanted to be exclusive and give this a genuine effort. When I asked what exactly that meant, he told me just that. Throughout this experience, I began second-guessing myself and questioning my understanding of the situation. He repeatedly told me I was brief and barely responded to his messages. He did not want to be with someone who ghosted him. I guess sleeping between night shifts was not acceptable for him. I scrolled back through my phone and our messages, asking him where the ghosting occurred, and he attempted to change the subject, caught in yet another lie. I asked how he would feel if we reversed roles. I proposed that he imagine one of his daughters driving an hour excited to see her partner, only to find the situation I faced. Then she had to drive an hour home in tears after being left devastated, only to be blamed for his actions. He just stared at the floor, saying I was not considering his perspective. I started to waver, questioning my reality. He kept saying I always arrived in a sour mood. I asked for instances that supported this claim, which did not include Valentine's Day. I acknowledge I was not great company that day, as I was going through a particularly low moment mentally, which I communicated to him, and he could not provide examples. He started saying I had always been in fight-or-flight mode with him. I still could not fathom what I was hearing. When I was prepared to start collecting the larger items, he asked if I needed help. Without hesitation, I replied, "Nope, I have my friend to assist me," to which he snidely remarked, "Oh right, you never need help." I said, "Right, actually just not from you." After I gathered all my belongings, I turned back and said, "I truly do love you, you know, this is terrible." Then I left. As soon as I got back in the truck, I broke down in tears all over again. I am grateful my friend and coworker was there. He was able to confirm that this man was gaslighting me and pointed out all the instances of contradiction in his statements. He reminded me of everything I am and have done for this man without any reciprocation, like driving 2 hours round trip, an hour after a 12-hour overnight shift, and advised me not to cry too much over a man who allowed me to endure all of that without any gratitude or reciprocation, as a real man would not have treated me in such a way. I am truly fortunate to have friends like him. The devastation I feel is different from my previous relationship. I still love my ex, he was my best friend and remains so. I was able to rationalize his affair as our relationship had reached a dysfunctional point. While it does not justify it, I know we were both troubled and suffering, self-destructing in our own ways. Do not misunderstand me. I was devastated, bedridden, not eating for weeks, in need of medical intervention. Ironically, it was this situation that overwhelmed me, not the chaos I faced at work. This current situation is confusing and still feels like a betrayal, but in a different manner. I finally passed out last night after 36 hours of functioning. I am unsure how I managed, but sleep has been elusive. I wake up grieving the life he promised and feeling pangs of betrayal, aware that he is gone. This became my routine, but I can already feel it getting better. Thank you to everyone who has responded and offered support. I have taken all the advice provided and I hope not to hear from him again. If I do, I will continue to ignore him, but for real this time. I have never posted to Reddit before, but this has proven therapeutic, and I genuinely appreciate the time you all have taken to read and comment. Story 4. My heart is breaking, my partner says, forget it, after I messed up our plans to see each other. I'm terrified that I'm a useless boyfriend and they'll leave me for good. Are my mistakes finally catching up to me, or can I fix this? I apologize if this post is too lengthy or challenging to read. I am a 19-year-old male, and I am terrified that my partner, who is an 18-year-old non-binary person, is about to end our relationship. I have attempted to write about this before, but the page closed and I lost all my progress. It was a very lengthy post, so I will try to summarize it as best as I can. We are in a long-distance relationship, which we officially began in June of last year. They reside in England while I live in Scotland. Since we started dating, we have had 2 trips together where we spent time in person. The first trip was in November of last year when I visited their home. The second trip was in January when they came to my house. We both cherished these trips because they allowed us to finally be with each other and take a break from our daily lives. For context, they live in a rather toxic household and I struggle with poor mental health. Being with them in person is incredible. It seems like they alleviate all of my fears and worries, allowing me to experience inner peace. However, when we part ways to go home, I revert to feeling empty, depressed, fragile, and filled with intense self-hatred. They have really helped me navigate tough times by encouraging me to seek medical attention when things got very bad, and I have tried to comfort them during their own hardships. It is important to note that they have a significantly more challenging life than I do. They had a very difficult childhood with a mother who treated them poorly, and they have endured so many hardships that I often feel guilty for being depressed all the time. We initially hoped that I could visit them for their birthday, which is on April 7th. However, I was asked about traveling to Wales to see my grandmother for the first time in years for her birthday, which also falls on that day. My mother arranged this visit because my grandmother is turning 90 this year and is in very poor health, leading my mother to suspect that my grandmother does not have much longer to live. I informed my partner about this, which understandably upset them. Ultimately, they told me that I needed to prioritize family and go see my grandmother. Thus, I agreed to the visit and booked the days off in my calendar, which were from April 4th to April 8th. I felt terrible about not being able to be there for my partner, especially since birthdays have never been significant for them. They told me that they had not really celebrated their birthday and had recently decided to simply go to work that day. They also expressed sadness about having to wait until May to see me again. We initially tried to plan a visit in March, but their mother would not allow me to stay over due to recent arguments between them. All of this left me feeling devastated, so I decided less than 2 weeks ago to try to book a flight for the second half of April to visit them. I sent them a voice recording detailing my plan and the flight prices I had found. Later that evening, they spoke to their mother to see if it would be permissible for me to stay during that time, and she agreed. All that remained was for me to request time off in my calendar and purchase the flight tickets. I saw how happy this made my partner as it gave us both something to look forward to, and seeing them happy was an incredible feeling. However, before I could request the days off last week, the prices for flights increased. I became terrified that I had waited too long and ruined our plans, especially since I noticed my partner appeared quite sad. For your understanding, I am a significant overthinker, and whenever my partner is angry, upset, or simply in a bad mood, I tend to worry that I did something to cause it or exacerbate the situation. My partner reassured me that I had not ruined anything and suggested we try from April 17th to April 24th, which were cheaper options. My partner seemed happy again and I felt optimistic about it. I then requested the time off the following day and waited for approval. However, I did not receive any word from my line manager until today. I should mention that I switched teams about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Today, while in the office, I decided to schedule a call between myself and my line manager for the afternoon. I messaged my partner to inform them about this and assured them that I would relay what he said. My new manager is quite down to earth. Regarding shifts and holidays, his philosophy is, do what you need to do as long as there is enough cover. During the call, I explained the dates I was requesting off and the reasons behind it. I did my best to persuade him that it was worth approving. In the end, although he understood and respected my intentions, he informed me he would have to deny my request due to insufficient cover. This response felt unjust, as there were only 2 other people off during that time, and even then they would only be away for the first few days of the trip. Moreover, I had received approval for the time off to see my grandmother, which also coincided with 2 other people being absent. The only time there is an absence is when 3 apprentices from the team attend training on the 22nd, but even then there would still be adequate coverage. I attempted to persuade him to reconsider, but he remained resolute. He mentioned that he would have accepted it had it been after Tuesday. After the meeting, I checked flight prices and realized that if I traveled from the 23rd to the 29th, the price would remain the same. I sent a message to my partner explaining what he had said and proposed requesting days off after the 23rd. However, my partner replied, "Never mind, it is not happening." I apologized and asked, "Would you like me to book some days off starting from the 23rd? They answered, "No, I am going to visit my grandparents in France on the 30th and plane tickets are expensive, forget it." I replied, "I am so sorry, I have ruined everything. I understand if you do not forgive me." They then responded, "Just forget it, I will talk to you later." This response terrified me. I fear that there was something I should have done or said to prevent this situation from occurring. I am also frightened that I may have given them false hope without realizing it. We both returned from work and have been on a call for 30 minutes. We have hardly said anything to one another. The silence is deafening. Since I left work, I have been anxious that this moment will be when my partner chooses to leave me. There have been instances in the past when things nearly reached that point due to my inattentiveness as a partner, and I am scared that this is the final straw. I am frustrated with myself for allowing this to happen. I feel as though there is something I could have done to change the outcome. I view myself as a terrible, useless boyfriend who does not deserve someone as wonderful as they are. I probably deserve to be alone for the rest of my life because all I seem to do is ruin everything. I would like to believe I have improved from my past mistakes, but perhaps I have not. I am unsure of what to do next. I am hoping that we can navigate this difficulty and that it will not be the event that ends our relationship. My partner is the best thing that has ever happened to me, and I cannot bear the thought of losing them. I just cannot shake the feeling that this will happen.